Jacob Bryant wrote, Analysis ANC Myth, pages 143-4. All knowledge of Gentile antiquity must be derived to us through the hands of the Grecians, and there is not of them a single writer, to whom we may not be indebted for some advantage. The Helladians, however, from whom we might expect most light, are to be admitted with the greatest caution. They were a bigoted people, highly prejudiced in their own favor, and so devoted to idle tradition that no arguments could wean them from their folly. Hence the surest resources are from Greeks of other countries. Among the poets, Lycophron, Callimachus, and Apollonius Rhodius are principally to be esteemed. The last of these was a native of Egypt, and the other two lived there, and have continual allusions to the antiquities of that country. Homer likewise abounds with a deal of mysterious lore, borrowed from the ancient Ammonian theology, with which his commentators have been often embarrassed. To these may be added such Greek writers of later date, who were either not born in Hellas, or were not so deeply tinctured with the vanity of that country. Much light may be also obtained from those learned men, by whom the scholia were written, which are annexed to the works of the poets above mentioned. Nonnus, too, who wrote the Dionysiaca, is not to be neglected. He who was a native of Panopolis in Egypt, ectis panos tis Egyptu Yegenimenos, Agathaias, L4, page 133, and had opportunity of collecting many ancient traditions and fragments of mysterious history, which never were known in Greece. To these may be added Porphyry, Proclus, and Jambliches, who professedly treat of Egyptian learning. The Isis and Osiris of Plutarch may be admitted with proper circumspection. It may be said that the whole is still an enigma, and I must confess that it is, but we receive it more copiously exemplified and more clearly defined, and it must necessarily be more genuine by being nearer the fountainhead, so that by comparing and adjusting the various parts, we are more likely to arrive at a solution of the hidden purport. But the great resource of all is to be found among the later antiquaries and historians. Many of these are writers of high rank, particularly Diodorus, Strabo, and Pausanias on the Gentile part, and of the fathers Theophilus, Tatianus, Athenagoras, Clemens, Origenes, Eusebius, Theodoretus, Syncellus, and the compiler of the Fasti Siculi, otherwise called Chronic and Pascal. Most of these were either of Egypt or Asia. They had a real taste for antiquity, and lived at a time some insight could be obtained, for till the Roman Empire was fully established, and every province in a state of tranquility, little light could be procured from those countries, whence the mythology of Greece was derived. The native Helladians were very limited in their knowledge. They had taken in the gross whatever was handed down by tradition, and assumed to themselves every history which was imported. They moreover held every nation but their own as barbarous, so that their insuperable vanity rendered it impossible for them to make any great advances in historical knowledge. But the writers whom I just now mentioned either had not these prejudices, or lived at a time when they were greatly subsided. They condescended to quote innumerable authors, and some of great antiquity, to whom the pride of Greece would never have appealed. I had once much talk upon this subject with a learned friend, since lost to the world, who could ill brook that Herodotus, Thucydides, Xenophon, should be discarded for Clemens, Origen, or Eusebius, and that Lysias and Demosthenes should give way to Libanius and Aristides. The name of Tzetzes or Eustathius he could not bear, to all which I repeatedly made answer, that it was by no means my intention to set aside any of the writers he mentioned, whose merits, as far as they extended, I held in great veneration. On the contrary, I should have recourse to their assistance as far as it would carry me, but I must at the same time take upon me to weigh those merits, and see wherein they consisted, and to what degree they were to be trusted. The Helladians were much to be admired for the smoothness of their periods, and a happy collocation of their terms. They showed a great propriety of diction, and a beautiful arrangement of their ideas, and the whole was attended with a rhythm and harmony, nowhere else to be found. But they were at the same time under violent prejudices, and the subject matter of which they treated was in general so brief and limited that very little could be obtained from it towards the history of other countries or a knowledge of ancient times. Even in respect to their own affairs, whatever light had been derived to them was so perverted and came through so dim a medium that it is difficult to make use of it to any determinate and salutary purpose. Yet the beauty of their composition has been attended with wonderful influence. See Theophilus ad Autolycum, L2, p. 357. Many have been so far captivated by this magic as to give an implicit credence to all that has been transmitted, and to sacrifice their judgment to the pleasures of the fancy. I suspect the admitted uniqueness, brevity, non-historical nature of the Helladian writing may be a result of forgeries by priests in the Middle Ages, taken as authentic by subsequent historians. Pliny wrote that the Volsentines were synonymous with Etruscans, nh. 3, 552, Volsentani cognomen Etrusci. I wrote, the real universal empire. Volsi was north of Tarquinii. The only record of this city is in the catalogues of geographers. Not one Greek or Roman writer accounts for it. This is staggering given that it was a location of immense wealth, jewelry, metalwork, pottery, and other ancient artifacts that were discovered in Volsi's cemeteries since the 1820s. Grant, the ETR. Page 160. If the artifacts are legitimate, it may indicate gross errors in the chronological timeline of European history. I suspect we are not only dealing with gross errors in the chronological timeline, but much of the details in it are forgery, and even worse, omissions of history that are unaccounted for as a result of those forgeries and the agendas of the religious institutions. To learn how I arrived at my conclusions and expose the nature of the religious institutions and their impact on our government, invest in the Spirit World series. To learn about the history of Europe that has been omitted or covered up, invest in the real universal empire. Become a member to access the rest of this article.